Chapter 14, Lesson 2, Speaking Out Against Slavery. So we're going to move on to the abolitionist movement, and away we go. So many people objected to slavery on moral grounds. One of them was William Lloyd Garrison. This was the editor and the creator of the Liberator magazine, which really was one of the more powerful pieces of literature that spoke out against slavery. And the abolitionist movement was just, you get it from the name, to abolish slavery. Abolition, abolishing. So people wanted to get rid of it. And they were called this because they wanted to abolish slavery, obviously. So there are lots of different ways that, that the word was spread. One of the big ones, though, was this idea of newspapers and how they were able to publish stories. Some were against slavery. Again, some were actually, some of the papers were actually taken and then burned by people who were pro-slavery. As a matter of fact, there was the case in Illinois of a person who was printing an anti-slavery newspaper, and his printing press got thrown into the river and he got shot. So yes, tensions did run high on this topic. Some abolitionists were against slavery but did not agree that African Americans should have equal rights. Other people saw that they should have equal rights. Many in the North, though, were a little bit worried because basically they had a position that was higher than some people, particularly immigrants. This is actually from, I took this out remembering a movie called The Gangs of New York, which talks about how immigration from Ireland and Germany and places like that had a major impact, and they did not want to compete with people who would then be able to do their jobs too. So there was a lot of fighting and disputes between all ethnic groups, but also against African Americans, free African Americans as well. The most famous papers were the North Star and the Liberator. Again, the North Star was in the previous picture right there. And this book is the one that really changes a lot of stuff. It's called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it was the most important novel about slavery. And it was a fictionalized account of what one person was going through. And basically it was tremendously important. It's a huge, huge bestseller. It really opened people's eyes about what slavery was like, because a lot of people from the North didn't have any idea of what it was like. It was written by a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe, and it was based on her experiences. She'd traveled by the Ohio River, which was the place that separated slave states from free states. It was a story of slavery and an attempted escape. And when Lincoln later on during during the Civil War, went ahead and met with Harriet Beecher Stowe, he actually said to her, "So you're the little woman who made this big war," because she's the one who really made people realize how horrible slavery was. People had a bad feeling about it in a lot of cases, but they didn't realize how bad it was. So there were some Southern abolitionists, and two of them were that were in the South as well, and that was really unpopular to be against slavery in the South. So it took some additional courage there. Two of them were their Grimke sisters, Angelina and Sarah. And they were the daughters of wealthy plantation owners. Eventually they did move north, and continued to speak out against slavery then. Now, many slaves tried to escape, and they would get whipped, beaten, have things like their Achilles tendons chopped so they wouldn't be able to run as easily. It was dangerous. It could take weeks or months before they got to the North. If they got to the North, they could be kidnapped back, so it's better to make it all the way to Canada or to Mexico or even the Caribbean. This map shows some of the places. Lots of times there was large rewards offered for escaped slaves, hundreds of dollars, and one of the more recent movies was 12 Years a Slave, which was about a guy who ended up going ahead and being kidnapped, a free man who was kidnapped and taken down to the South and had to work for 12 years as a slave. So a lot of horrible stuff. The Underground Railroad was not a railroad. It wasn't underground. It was instead an escape route organized to help slaves that were trying to leave the South. And it was a system of secret routes, and they were called conductors, the people who helped man the place where people to help direct people. There were passengers; those were the slaves who were trying to escape. Stations were the people could stay, were the places where people could stay. And Levi Coffin was considered kind of the president of this. He and his wife helped 3,000 slaves, about 3,000 slaves at different points. And again, he was white, so it wasn't as suspicious, I guess, but I'm guessing a lot of people still would have liked to have gotten rid of him. Many volunteers were African American and some were slaves, and that was even riskier for them in a lot of ways because if they got caught, they could have been killed or certainly at least beaten. Harriet Tubman's the most famous of those. She escaped in a harrowing ordeal. She realized that she needed to help others, and she made 19 trips back, and each of those 19 times she could have been caught. She was nicknamed Moses because she led people to freedom and helped about 300 slaves and was often hunted with a huge reward on her head. But she was never caught. Now, this says abolition and women's rights. So, women's rights movement started partially because of the abolitionist movement, because people started looking around and saying, hey, if freed slaves should have rights, women should have more rights too. And many people started to look at how women didn't have equal rights and started to advocate for them. Seneca Falls Convention was a really important convention. An anti-slavery convention refused to allow women to take part. So two women, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, along with others, organized a convention for women's rights. It started in Seneca Falls in New York. That's 1848. And the convention adopted, it was patterned off the Declaration of Independence. It's called the Declarations of Rights and Sentiments, and it asserted that women and men should have equal rights, including voting rights and property rights. Obviously, this didn't get adopted, and the Constitution wasn't changed until 1920, but still, it was a big step in the direction. There were men and women there that were both advocating for those rights. This is Sojourner Truth. She was a freed slave who spoke out both on women's rights and against slavery, and she was a very, very powerful speaker. She has one famous speech called Ain't I a Woman, which talks about how she could do whatever a man could do. Could they carry? She could carry water the way just a man could. She could do anything a man could do. And that is, we are done.